Cashin Virely was having a hell of a day. Actually, scratch that. He was having a hell of a life. But today was particularly hellish, even by the standards of a renowned human attorney on Heliost, a rogue planet that spun like a demented top in the outer fringes of a solar system most people had the good sense to stay away from. He sat at his desk, a slab of metal pretending to be a workspace, sifting through a mountain of electronic files that would have given a less cynical man a migraine. But Cashin was no stranger to headaches. In fact, he collected them like some people collected stamps. It was a hobby, and he was damn good at it. "Cashin," said a voice, interrupting his perusal of yet another document that detailed why interstellar law was a cosmic-sized joke. "You've got a holo call from a Solari Corp representative." Cashin looked up from his screen, which was currently displaying a bureaucratic nightmare of forms written in legalese. "Tell them I'm busy trying to untangle the legal equivalent of a black hole." His assistant, a sharp-tongued AI named Byte, flickered into view, her holographic form standing with arms crossed. "They said it's urgent, something about Earth." That got his attention. Earth was, after all, his home planet, even if he hadn't set foot on its terra firma in years. "All right, patch them through," he said, sighing like a man about to dive headfirst into a vat of acid. The screen shifted and was replaced by a face that looked like it had been sculpted by someone with a deep affection for sharp angles and disdain for symmetry. The Solari Corp representative's eyes were the color of a particularly unpleasant storm. "Mr. Virely," the alien said, its tone as smooth as sandpaper. "We've got a problem." "You don't say," Cashin drawled, leaning back in his chair. "And here I thought this was a social call. You might want to take this seriously," the alien continued, ignoring his sarcasm. "Earth has been accidentally terraformed." Cashin blinked. Once, twice. He decided he hadn't misheard. Accidentally terraformed. How do you accidentally terraform a planet? It appears that a clerical error resulted in the initiation of a full-scale terraforming procedure. A clerical error. He couldn't help but laugh, a harsh, barking sound that echoed in his small office. So what? Some intern pressed the wrong button, and now Earth looks like an intergalactic vacation spot for the rich and shameless. Essentially, yes. Cashin ran a hand through his hair, which was starting to resemble a particularly stubborn weed patch. "And what does Solari Corp intend to do about this mishap?" "We expect Earth to file a legal claim for reparations. As a representative of Earth, we are summoning you to defend this claim in the interstellar court." "Great," Cashin said deadpan, "because I was just thinking my life was lacking in high-stakes courtroom drama." "You'll be compensated, of course," the alien added, a hint of exasperation in its voice. "Oh, well, in that case," he replied dryly, "sign me up." The call ended, leaving Cashin staring at the blank screen. Byte chimed in. "Looks like your hobby's about to pay off." "Yeah," Cashin muttered, standing up and stretching like a cat that's had one too many close calls with a vacuum cleaner. "Now, where did I leave my lucky tie?" A few hours later found Cashin in the hallowed, if somewhat grimy, halls of the interstellar court. It wasn't exactly the kind of place that inspired awe. More like a desire to take a long, hot shower and possibly burn your clothes afterwards. The walls were a drab gray. The lighting was reminiscent of a malfunctioning sun lamp, and the air smelled faintly of despair. He was ushered into a courtroom that managed to be both cavernous and claustrophobic at the same time. The bench was occupied by a collection of judges who looked like they'd seen everything the universe had to offer and were unimpressed by all of it. Cashin adjusted his tie, which was as lucky as a charm found at the bottom of a cereal box, and took his place at the defense table. Across from him sat a contingent of Solari Corp lawyers, each one more reptilian than the last. The lead judge, a creature that resembled a particularly disgruntled squid, looked down at him. "Mr. Virely, you are here to represent the interests of Earth, is that correct?" "That's right, Your Honor," Cashin replied, flashing a smile that had gotten him into more trouble than he'd care to admit. And you understand the charges against Solari Corp. I do, he said, resisting the urge to add that understanding didn't mean he thought they were anything less than ridiculous. Very well, the judge intoned, its voice like the sound of 1,000 whiskers being pulled from a cat's arse. You may begin your proceedings. Cashin stood, smoothing the front of his suit. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, he began, what we have here is a failure to communicate, a clerical error of cosmic proportions, if you will. He paused for effect, noting the unimpressed faces staring back at him. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does a company accidentally terraform an entire planet? Well, that's a question we all want answered. There was a murmur from the Solari lawyers, likely brimming with protests and technicalities. But let's not forget, Cashin continued, warming to his theme, that Earth is more than a collection of land masses and water bodies. It's a living, breathing entity with a rich history and billions of inhabitants who, despite their many flaws, had no intention of becoming the latest feature on an alien travel brochure. The lead Solari lawyer, whose name was unpronounceable but sounded suspiciously like a sneeze, stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The defense is engaging in emotional manipulation. Cashin smirked. Your Honor, I assure you I am merely stating facts, and if those facts happen to tug at the heartstrings, well, that's just a bonus. The judge waved a tentacle dismissively. Continue, Mr. Virely. Cashin leaned on the lectern, enjoying the sound of his own voice perhaps a bit too much. The question we face today is not just about compensation, but about accountability. About recognizing that mistakes have consequences. More murmuring from the Solari side, this time tinged with annoyance. And let's be honest, Cashin added, if we're going to hold Earth accountable for its missteps, then surely the same standard applies to Solari Corp. At that moment, a device on the table in front of him began to beep insistently. Cashin glanced down, eyebrows shooting up as he read the notification. It seems, he said slowly, that Earth has just been declared an interstellar protected zone. This was news to everyone, and the courtroom erupted into chaos. Judges conferred with each other, Solari lawyers scrambled through their files, and Cashin simply stood there, a bemused expression on his face. Well, he said to no one in particular, looks like things just got interesting. The lead judge banged its gavel, or what passed for a gavel in a court where most of the judges didn't have hands. Order, it bellowed, though it sounded more like a plea than a command. Cashin sat back down, folding his hands in his lap and watching the pandemonium unfold like a spectator at a particularly lively gladiator match. Bite's voice buzzed in his ear. I did some digging while you were waxing poetic up there. Turns out some ancient interstellar treaty just kicked in. Earth's a protected zone now. Convenient, Cashin muttered, though he couldn't quite wipe the grin off his face. Guess that changes the game, huh? You could say that, Bite replied. Solari's gonna have to jump through hoops now, and some of them are on fire. Good, Cashin said, more to himself than to Bite. Let them squirm. As the courtroom slowly returned to a semblance of order, Cashin couldn't help but feel a perverse sense of satisfaction. He hadn't solved the problem, far from it, but he'd certainly thrown a spanner into Solari's well-oiled machine. The lead judge resumed its position, glaring down at him with an expression that suggested it had half a mind to toss the whole lot of them into the nearest black hole. Mr. Virely, in light of this new development, the court will adjourn for further deliberations. Cashin nodded, standing up and gathering his things. Thank you, Your Honor. He left the courtroom, the buzz of conversation still echoing in his ears, and stepped into the corridor. The halls of justice were as dingy as ever, but today they seemed to echo with a promise of something different. As he made his way back to his office, Cashin couldn't help but chuckle to himself. Earth had just become the universe's most unlikely tourist trap. And for better or worse, he was right at the center of it all. Well, he said aloud, looks like I'm in for one hell of a ride. Cashin vilely strode down the grimy halls of the interstellar court, the echoes of chaos still faintly ringing in his ears. The place was a maze of bureaucratic misery, designed by someone with a knack for making even the most straightforward tasks feel like a slog through a swamp of red tape. And right now he was knee-deep in it. "So," Byte's voice piped up in his ear, "how does it feel to be Earth's most unlikely hero?" "Hero," Cashin snorted. "I'm just the sucker who gets to dig through this mess with a teaspoon." "Well, you do have a knack for falling face first into cosmic disasters." "Comes with the job," he replied, brushing past a janitor who looked like he'd been mopping the same spot for decades. "What's the latest on Earth, Byte?" The AI holographic form materialized beside him, flickering slightly due to the shoddy court technology. "I've been pulling data from every source I can find, and it's not pretty. Turns out, Earth's ecosystems are reacting like a cat in a room full of rocking chairs." Cashin grimaced. "Let me guess, mass extinction, climate shifts, and an all-around apocalypse party." "Pretty much," Byte confirmed. "The terraforming process has accelerated everything. Forests are turning to deserts, oceans are boiling, and I hear New York has a new beachside property problem." "Well, at least someone's getting a tan," Cashin quipped, though his usual humor felt a bit forced. Earth might have been a distant memory, but it was still home, sort of. "And what does Solari Corp plan on doing about this? Other than admiring the view, of course." Byte's holographic eyes rolled dramatically. "The Solari representative, Xylo Zinter, is playing hardball. They claim Earth's impending ecological collapse is a natural consequence of progress." "Ah, progress," Cashin muttered. "The universal excuse for screwing things up beyond all recognition." And Byte continued, "Zinter's proposed a bold solution." Cashin stopped, turning to face his AI companion. "Let me guess, they want to turn Earth into a giant theme park. Come see the dying planet, tickets half off." "Close," Byte said. "They want to seize Earth as compensation. Use it as a testbed for future terraforming projects." Cashin let out a mirthless laugh. "Of course they do. Why save a planet when you can milk it for corporate gain?" As they reached his office, Cashin pushed open the door, revealing the cluttered chaos within. Papers, actual physical papers, were strewn about alongside more electronic files than he'd care to count. The room looked like it had been ransacked by a particularly enthusiastic data hoarder. He sank into his chair, the leather creaking in protest. "All right, Byte, what are our options?" "Well, you could try appealing to the Interstellar Environmental Council," Byte suggested, "though they have the efficiency of a glacier and the compassion of a black hole." "Yeah, and they hate lawyers," Cashin added. "Almost as much as I hate coming to work sober." "Alternatively," Byte continued, "you could try to negotiate directly with Zinter. See if there's any wiggle room before they turn Earth into their personal science experiment." Cashin raised an eyebrow. "Negotiate with the consortium that accidentally terraformed a planet. Sounds about as fun as juggling plasma grenades. But potentially less explosive," Byte reasoned. Cashin leaned back, looking at the ceiling tiles with a 1,000-yard stare. "Fine. Set up a meeting. I want to see what makes these Solari tick. Besides, I'm curious how someone with the name Xylo Zinter made it through a single school day without getting laughed out of the classroom." "On it," Byte replied, her form vanishing as she set about arranging a holo call. Cashin let out a long breath, drumming his fingers on the desk. The situation was spiraling faster than he could keep up with, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to be caught in the crossfire of cosmic corporate greed. A few Iors and several caffeine-infused beverages later, Cashin found himself staring at the face of Xylo Zinter, the Solari Corp prosecutor, on his holo screen. The alien's features were as sharp and unforgiving as a broken bottle, and his eyes had the warmth of a deep space vacuum. "Mr. Virley," Xylo began, his voice smooth like oil slick on water, "I understand you wish to discuss the situation on Earth." "That's right," Cashin replied, flashing a smile that was more teeth than warmth. "I figured it might be nice to know why you're so keen on turning my home planet into a corporate playground." Xylo's expression didn't change. "It's simple economics, Mr. Virley. Earth is a valuable asset and its current state of disarray presents an opportunity for advancement. Advancement for whom? Cashin shot back. Certainly not the people living there. The alien tilted his head slightly. Progress often requires sacrifice. Surely you understand this. Funny, Cashin said, leaning forward. I always thought progress was supposed to improve things, not set them on fire. Xylo's gaze was unwavering. Our proposal stands to benefit many. Your opposition is noted but ultimately irrelevant. Cashin resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Look, I'm not here to debate ethics with you. I'm here to find a solution that doesn't involve bulldozing my planet into oblivion. Solutions are rarely without cost, Xylo replied, his tone as dry as a Martian desert. Then maybe it's time you started counting the costs a bit more carefully, Cashin said. Because if Earth goes down, you're not just losing a potential investment. You're losing credibility, trust, and probably a whole lot of money in legal fees. There was a moment of silence, the kind that stretched and strained like a rubber band on the verge of snapping. Interesting point, Xylo conceded, though his expression remained inscrutable. Perhaps there is room for negotiation. Glad to hear it, Cashin said, though his smile was all business. Because I've got a few ideas and they're not all awful. The call ended, leaving Cashin alone once more. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, feeling the weight of the universe, or at least one very troublesome planet, resting heavily on his shoulders. Bite's holographic form reappeared, her expression one of cautious optimism. How'd it go? Cashin shrugged. Well, I didn't get vaporized, so that's a start. I think I might have gotten Zinter to consider a compromise. That's something, Bite agreed. But what next? Next, Cashin sighed. I figure out how to sell a compromise to a bunch of people who barely trust me to water their plants, let alone save their planet. And how are you planning to do that? Cashin chuckled, though there was little humor in it. The same way I always do, with a lot of talking and a little bit of luck. As Cashin leaned back in his chair, contemplating the monumental task ahead, he couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd bitten off more than he could chew this time. But then again, when had that ever stopped him before? The days that followed were a blur of negotiations and scheming. Cashin spent every waking moment trying to wrangle a deal that wouldn't end with Earth as a cratered monument to corporate negligence. It was like trying to herd cats with a cattle prod, unpleasant, exhausting, and liable to leave you with scars. Bite kept him updated on Earth's deteriorating condition. The planet was like an overripe fruit, poised to burst at any moment. Sea levels were dancing a jig, and species were dropping off the map faster than a politician dodging a scandal. But Cashin wasn't about to let Earth go under without a fight. He'd spent too long navigating the tangled web of interstellar law to back down now. All right, he said, pacing his office like a caged animal. We need to hit Solari where it hurts. And where's that? Bite asked, hovering nearby like a snarky guardian angel. Their reputation, Cashin replied, snapping his fingers. They want Earth for their experiments, but they can't afford the PR disaster of being labeled planet killers. We need to make this public. Bite considered this, her expression thoughtful. It could work, but it'll be like poking a hornet's nest with a stick. My specialty, Cashin said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Let's leak the details. I want every media outlet from here to the outer rim talking about Solari's little mishap. Bite nodded. I'll get on it. But you know this is going to make you a target, right? Cashin shrugged. I've been a target since the day I graduated law school. Besides, I'd rather go down swinging than sit around waiting for the universe to implode. As Bite disappeared to carry out her task, Cashin felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. It was a dangerous game he was playing, but in a universe where the stakes were always life or death, it was the only way he knew how to play. He just hoped that when the dust settled, there'd be something left worth saving. The next morning, Cashin woke to a flurry of notifications and messages pinging on his datapad. The news was out, and Earth was the galaxy's newest hot-button issue. Every Holonet channel was buzzing with reports of Solari's blunder, and the court of public opinion was already rendering its verdict. Cashin smirked to himself, feeling a rare sense of satisfaction. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a start, and in this business, you took your wins where you could find them. He spent the day fielding calls from journalists, other attorneys, and a few old friends who were as surprised to hear from him as he was to hear from them. The consensus was clear. Solari was on the defensive, and Earth might just have a fighting chance. Bite was practically beaming when she materialized later that afternoon. "You did it, Cashin. Earth is trending galaxy-wide, and Solari's stock is plummeting faster than a lead comet." "Good," Cashin said, though he knew better than to get too comfortable. "Now we need to keep the pressure on. If they think we're backing down, they'll pounce like a starved predator. And what's the plan for that?" Cashin leaned back, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Simple. We keep talking, keep negotiating, and we don't let them catch their breath. If they want a game of interstellar chess, then let's see how they handle a few curveballs." As the days passed, Cashin threw himself into the fray, pushing for a resolution that wouldn't leave Earth in ruins. He'd found himself in deep before, but this was different. This was personal, and he was willing to go to whatever lengths necessary to set things right. In the end, it wasn't just about winning. It was about proving that even in a universe where power was wielded by a select few, one person could still make a difference. It was about standing up against the odds, even when every step felt like wading through quicksand. And as Cashin looked out at the stars from his office window, he couldn't help but smile. Maybe the universe was a cold, indifferent place, but that didn't mean you had to be. Not when there was so much worth fighting for. For better or worse, he was ready to see this through to the end. Cashin vilely sat in a dimly lit room that smelled faintly of desperation and overused air conditioning. The interstellar court was the bureaucratic equivalent of a black hole. Once you got sucked in, there wasn't much chance of coming out whole. He was flanked by his team of specialists, people who might not be the A-team, but were definitely the B-plus squad. Verla Nix, the tech wizard who could hack a starship faster than most people could tie their shoes, was currently swearing at a console that looked like it had seen better days. And then there was Dr. Taryn Quill, a biologist with the sunny disposition of a cactus in a drought. He was busy flipping through a pile of electronic files, muttering curses under his breath that would make a sailor blush. "All right, everyone," Cashin said, clapping his hands together like a ringmaster about to introduce a circus act. "Our mission: gather evidence that humans aren't just going to curl up and die because Earth's throwing a climate tantrum. You mean besides the obvious evidence that we haven't all died yet?" Verla quipped, not looking up from her console. "Exactly," Cashin replied with a grin. "We need something that'll hold up in court. Something Solari can't brush off with their usual legal voodoo. Easier said than done, Doctor." Taryn grumbled. He ran a hand through his hair, which was sticking up in all directions like he'd just rolled out of bed. "Solari's got more red tape than a Christmas parade," true, Cashin conceded. "But they haven't met us," Verla snorted. "If they had, they'd probably just double the red tape and call it a day." "Optimism, Verla. That's what I like about you," Cashin replied, leaning back in his chair. "Now, let's get to work before Solari decides we're all better off as space dust." The team dove into the task at hand, like miners hacking away at a stubborn vein of ore. Verla was pounding away at the keyboard, trying to bypass layers of bureaucratic encryption that would have made a seasoned accountant weep. "Doctor." Taryn was knee-deep in research logs, looking for any sign that humanity's adaptability might be more than just a rumor. Cashin, for his part, was busy convincing himself that he wasn't completely insane for thinking this was a good idea. Of course, sanity was a relative concept in his line of work. Just as they started making headway, Bite appeared, her holographic form flickering like a TV with bad reception. "Cashin, you're not going to like this." "Fantastic," Cashin said dryly. "What is it?" "Solari's filed an injunction," Bite announced, her tone as cheerful as a funeral dirge. They're claiming interference with their operations and are demanding immediate cessation of our activities. Of course they are, Cashin sighed, rubbing his temples. What's next? They going to accuse us of stealing their lunch money too? Wouldn't put it past them, Verla muttered, still focused on her screen. Dr. Taryn looked up, a rare smile flickering across his lips. Well, at least they're consistent. Consistently awful, Cashin chuckled despite himself. Yeah, they're nothing if not predictable. All right, let's deal with this. Bite, how do we counter? We've got a few options, Bite replied, ticking off points on her fingers. We could file a counter motion, but that'll take time. Alternatively, we can try to negotiate terms, but that'll mean giving up some ground. Giving up ground's not really my style, Cashin said, thinking aloud. How about we do both? File the counter motion and use the time to negotiate better terms. Bold move, Verla commented. That's either genius or suicidal. Why not both? Cashin grinned. Keeps things interesting. The team worked late into the artificial night, each member locked in their own battle against the mountain of obstacles Solari had thrown in their path. Cashin could feel the pressure mounting like a bad headache, but he refused to let it show. On days like this, you either laughed or cried, and crying just wasn't an option. The following day, Cashin's datapad lit up with new notifications. Solari's lawyers had responded, as expected, with enough legal jargon to drown a whale. They were determined to make this as difficult as possible, which only fueled Cashin's resolve. All right, team, Cashin called out, his voice echoing in the cramped room. Change of plan. We're going to hit Solari from a new angle. Dr. Taryn, how's the research coming? The biologist shrugged, looking more optimistic than Cashin had seen him in days. Actually, I found something. There's evidence that some species are adapting to Earth's new conditions faster than expected. Perfect, Cashin said, his mind already racing. Can we extrapolate that to suggest humans will do the same? It's a stretch, Dr. Taryn admitted, but it's possible. And with the right spin is my middle name, Cashin interjected. Or it would be if my parents had a better sense of humor, Verla chimed in, a determined glint in her eyes. And I've managed to crack a few more of Solari's files. They're trying to cover up a failed project that was supposed to accelerate human adaptation. Spoiler alert, it didn't work as planned. Cashin rubbed his hands together. Now we're talking. Let's use that. Show everyone that Solari's not just out to exploit Earth, but that they're also incompetent at it. You really want to paint a target on your back, don't you? Bite asked, materializing beside him with an arched eyebrow. Can't hit what they can't catch, Cashin replied. Let's keep this train rolling. Dr. Taryn, prepare a report on your findings. Verla, compile everything you've got on Solari's blunders. Bite, work with the legal team to finalize our counter motion. The room buzzed with activity, and despite the looming threat of Solari's lawyers breathing down their necks, Cashin felt a surge of hope. Maybe they were all a bunch of misfits trying to keep the universe from falling apart, but at least they were his misfits. And together, they might just pull off the impossible. As the hours passed and the team worked tirelessly, Cashin couldn't help but wonder what kind of future they were fighting for. A future where Earth's ecosystems weren't just a footnote in a corporate handbook, where humanity wasn't just a blip on some accountant's ledger. A future where people like him still had a say in the grand cosmic scheme of things. The next day arrived with Solari's legal team unleashing a storm of paperwork that could have buried a small moon. Cashin dove into the legal trenches, armed with nothing more than his wits and a solid caffeine buzz. Seems like they're really pulling out all the stops, Verla remarked, peering over his shoulder at the latest barrage of legalese. They must have hired a poet to draft this nonsense, Cashin said, scanning the documents. Look at all these metaphors. I mean, who describes a hostile takeover as a waltz in the starlight, someone who's never danced, Dr. Taryn muttered, not looking up from his own work. Cashin found himself chuckling. All right, let's break this down. Bite, see if there's anything new we haven't already addressed. Bite's form shimmered as she processed the information. Most of it's the same, just rephrased. But they've added a new angle, claiming our actions are causing undue stress on their employees. Oh, please, Verla snorted. Like they give two credits about their employees. Typical corporate hypocrisy, Dr. Taryn added. Caring about employees when it's convenient, ignoring them the rest of the time. Let's use that, Cashin suggested, a plan forming in his mind. If they want to play the empathy card, let's turn it back on them. Highlight how their actions are affecting Earth's population, humans and non-humans alike. Bold strategy, Byte commented. Might just work, or blow up in our faces, Verla added, though there was a hint of admiration in her voice. But that's half the fun, right? Exactly, Cashin said, a wicked grin plastered on his face. Now, let's get to work. It's time we showed Solari that Earth's not just a planet, it's a home. And some homes are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The team set to work with renewed vigor, throwing themselves into the task like soldiers preparing for battle. Cashin coordinated their efforts, ensuring each piece of evidence fell into place like a well-oiled machine. As the day wore on, Cashin felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The stakes were high, and failure wasn't an option. But for the first time in what felt like ages, he felt a sense of certainty. They were on the right track, and with a little luck and a lot of tenacity, they might just pull off the impossible. The final draft of their countermotion was a masterpiece of legal maneuvering, a testament to their determination and grit. Cashin stood back and surveyed their work with a sense of pride that was rare for him. "We did it," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "We might actually have a shot." "About time," Verla quipped, though Cashin could see the relief in her eyes. "Now let's see if Solari flinches, Doctor." Taryn nodded, his usual dire expression lightened by a rare smile. "Whatever happens, we've given them a run for their money, more like a sprint," Byte added, her holographic form flickering with approval. "Now it's time to brace for their next move," Cashin nodded, feeling the familiar mix of anticipation and dread settle in. They'd come this far, and there was no turning back. Whatever Solari threw at them next, he knew they were ready. As ready as a ragtag team of misfits could be against the galaxy's most powerful corporation. But sometimes, that was more than enough. Cashin sat at the rusting console, staring at the latest batch of files Verla had managed to pry from Solari's clenched digital jaws. They flashed past his eyes like confetti at an intergalactic parade. It was a mess of numbers, charts, and reports that could have made an auditor weep tears of joy or despair. Is it just me, or does anyone else feel Solari's meetings must be like a circus? All smoke and mirrors with a chance of getting trampled by an elephant, Cashin remarked, his eyes glued to the screen. Byte flickered into view, her holographic eyebrows raised. More like a firing squad with paperwork. There's no evidence of them ever hosting a successful meeting without at least one metaphorical casualty. Sounds like a party, Verla chimed in, tapping ferociously at her keyboard. "I'll bring the confetti, you bring the masks." Doctor Taryn snorted from his corner, still buried in his research logs. "I'd rather bring a flamethrower," he muttered, his voice a low rumble of irritation. It was his usual tone today, reflecting the pile of data he was drowning in. Cashin leaned back, stretching his arms until his joints protested. "You know, when I signed up for this gig, I imagined more action, less paper. Be careful what you wish for," Byte warned. "I've got a bad feeling about our next move." "You and me both, Byte," Cashin agreed, turning back to Verla. "How are we looking on the Solari screw-ups front?" "Fabulous," Verla said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "I've got enough material here to stage a comedy roast. Solari's terraforming tech is about as reliable as a politician's promise." Cashin perked up at that. "Faulty tech, that's a gift from the universe, or maybe just shoddy engineering." "There's a catch," Verla interjected, bringing the mood down faster than a lead balloon. "There's evidence that Solari's tech wasn't just faulty, it was dangerous." "We could use it, but it's risky." "Risk is my middle name," Cashin quipped. "Right after can't catch a break." "So what's the plan, fearless leader?" Dr. Terran asked, his tone carrying enough skepticism to sink a battleship. "It's simple," Cashin replied, rubbing his hands together. "We use Solari's own incompetence as a weapon, show them their tech is as flawed as their ethics." Bite interjected with a dry chuckle. "Holo call incoming. It's from Xylo Zinter." "Perfect timing," Cashin groaned. "Let's see what kind of drivel they're spouting this time." Xylo's hologram materialized, looking every bit the sneering alien overlord. His storm-colored eyes were like twin black holes, sucking in any semblance of warmth. "Cashin Virely," Xylo began, his voice dripping with condescension. "I trust this call finds you well." "About as well as a space slug in a salt storm," Cashin shot back. "What do you want, Xylo?" "I thought you'd be interested in hearing the latest evidence we've uncovered," Xylo replied, his lips curling into a smirk so sharp it could have cut glass. "Evidence?" Cashin echoed, his interest piqued despite himself. "Indeed," Xylo continued smoothly. "We've obtained data that suggests humanity's ability to adapt to Earth's changing climate is severely limited. Your claim that humans can survive Earth's new conditions is, well, optimistic at best." Cashin chuckled, though there was little humor in it. "Optimism isn't a crime, Xylo." "If it were, I'd have been arrested years ago." "Be that as it may," Xylo replied, clearly unfazed, "this data undermines your entire case." Cashin shared a quick glance with Bite, who nodded, indicating she'd already begun analyzing the files Xylo had sent. "We'll see about that," Cashin said, attempting to sound more confident than he felt. "Do enjoy your last desperate attempts to salvage this mess, Cashin." "I find them most entertaining," Xylo said before his hologram vanished, leaving the room considerably colder. "Charming fellow," Dr. Terran said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Like a cobra with a law degree," Cashin muttered, turning to Bite. "What do you have for me?" Bite blinked through the data streams, her fingers a blur of light. "It's bad," she said bluntly. "They've got simulations showing catastrophic failure rates for human habitation in the new climate zones." "Fantastic," Cashin sighed, feeling the weight on his shoulders grow exponentially. "Just what we needed, a reinforced nail in our coffin." "But," Bite continued, her tone brightening, "there are inconsistencies. Their models are based on data from early experiments unreliable at best." Cashin perked up at that. "Unreliable, huh? That's our angle. If we can discredit their evidence, we might just swing this in our favor." "Not a lot of time to do it," Verla warned, her eyes glued to her screens. "Time's never on our side," Cashin replied. "But who needs sleep, right? Or sanity, Doctor?" Terran added, his expression a mix of resignation and determination. "All right, team," Cashin said, clapping his hands together. "Let's pull another miracle out of the hat, shall we? Bite, get those inconsistencies ready for prime time. Verla, dig deeper into their terraforming disasters. Terran, see if you can poke any more holes in their biology data." The room buzzed with renewed energy, or desperation, depending on who you asked, as they all dove back into their respective tasks. Cashin, for his part, felt the familiar adrenaline rush of a man teetering on the edge of disaster. It was a feeling he'd grown all too accustomed to over the years. The hours ticked by with a steady march that was almost mocking. Cashin could feel the clock sneering at him, much like the Solari lawyers surely were. But he wasn't ready to roll over and play dead just yet, not when they were this close to turning the tide. "Got something," Verla announced, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a laser through butter. "More evidence of cover-ups. Solari's been fudging their success rates for decades." "Now you're speaking my language," Cashin grinned. "Get it compiled and ready to throw in their smug faces," Dr. Terran interrupted with a rare note of enthusiasm. "And on my end, there's evidence of human adaptability to extreme environments, just not the ones Solari's using for their models. We could use this to argue our case." Cashin nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. "It's all coming together. Time to make our move and show Solari what we're made of." Bite materialized beside him, her expression one of focused determination. "Let's dismantle their case one piece at a time. Like pulling legs off a spider, Cashin agreed, his voice as grim as his resolve. All right, let's get to it. With a renewed sense of purpose, they set to work. It was a chaotic whirlwind of activity, a frantic race against time that had them all on edge. But underneath the tension was a shared determination, a refusal to back down in the face of overwhelming odds. Cashin coordinated their efforts with the precision of a seasoned commander, ensuring that every piece of evidence fell into place. Byte's holographic form flitted around the room, providing updates and assistance wherever needed. Don't forget the caffeine, Verla joked, though there was a real edge of desperation in her voice. Never, Cashin replied, raising his mug like a toast to their collective insanity. As the final pieces clicked into place, Cashin stood back and surveyed their work. It was a patchwork quilt of legal loopholes and scientific rebuttals, all stitched together with the kind of reckless ingenuity that had become their trademark. We've done it, he said, a note of disbelief mingled with pride. Now, let's see if Solari blinks, Dr. Terran added, his voice carrying a sense of anticipation rather than the usual doom. Or implodes, Verla muttered, though there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. The team took a collective breath, the calm before the inevitable storm. They had no illusions about the battle ahead, but they were ready to face it head-on. Cashin knew that whatever came next, they'd meet it together, and for all their flaws and failings, they were more than just a ragtag bunch of misfits. They were a force to be reckoned with. As they sent off their counter-evidence, Cashin leaned back, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. It was a high-stakes game they were playing, but for the first time, it felt like the odds might finally be in their favor. Let's see what Solari's next move is, Byte said, her tone as optimistic as an AI could muster. Whatever it is, Cashin replied, a determined glint in his eye, we'll be ready. The room echoed with the hum of technology and the unspoken promise of their shared resolve. They had their backs against the wall, but they weren't out yet. In this universe, where corporations thought they held all the strings, sometimes it was the seemingly insignificant threads that unraveled an empire. Cashin couldn't help but smile at the thought. Maybe, just maybe, they'd be the ones to pull that thread. Cashin vilely rubbed his eyes as if he could somehow wipe away the fatigue that clung to him like a stubborn barnacle on a corroded starship. The makeshift war room was a cluttered mess of cables, blinking screens, and empty caffeine containers, more like a crime scene than a strategic planning hub. If organization was a virtue, they were definitely sinners. Byte flickered into view, her holographic form casting an eerie glow. I've run the simulations 3 times. The results haven't changed and won't, no matter how much you glare at them, Cashin sighed. What, glowering isn't a recognized scientific method now? What has the universe come to? An abyss of despair and questionable life choices, Byte replied dryly. Speaking of which, Verla's console is on the fritz again. Of course it is. Cashin's voice dripped with sarcasm. Why wouldn't it be? Verla's been treating that thing like a vintage wine, delicately upgrading it piece by piece. Should have just torched it and started over. He spotted Verla hunched over the device, muttering curses that would curl a mechanic's hair. Need a hand, Verla, or a good hammer, maybe. She didn't look up. Unless your hand prints money or your hammer magically converts this junk into something Solari can't laugh at, I'm good, Cashin chuckled. What I'd give for a machine that printed currency. We could buy ourselves out of this mess. Verla finally glanced up, a smirk playing on her lips. If wishes were starships, we'd all be cruising comfortably through the galaxy. But here we are, grounded by busted tech and empty pockets. Speaking of busted, Dr. Terran interjected, pinching the bridge of his nose. The biological data we've got on adapting to Earth's new climate. It's not exactly a masterpiece of hope. Let me guess, Cashin said. It's more like a toddler's finger painting after too much sugar, more like a Picasso, if Picasso was feeling particularly nihilistic, Terran replied. We've got a few strands of hope, but they are tangled in a web of disasters. Cashin nodded, his expression grim. And I'm guessing we don't have the luxury of time to sort through that web. Terran shrugged. Time's never been our friend. I hear it's currently dating Solari's legal team. Wonderful. A match made in hell, or the interstellar court, which is practically the same thing. Cashin leaned back, running a hand through his hair. All right, team, let's focus. We've got to pull something out of this dumpster fire. As if on cue, the lights flickered ominously, the room's atmosphere shifting from tense to downright funereal. The energy reserves were hitting critical lows, another delightful cherry on their sundae of despair. Great, Verla muttered, glaring at the ceiling. Didn't need lights anyway. We'll just work by the warm glow of impending failure. Adds to the ambience, Cashin quipped. Nothing screams success like a dimly lit room full of doomed optimists. Bite's form flickered with momentary instability before settling back into place. Our power draw is unsustainable at this level. We're going to have to cut non-essential systems. Cashin arched an eyebrow. Define non-essential. Because last I checked, breathing was pretty high on that list. Non-essential to the mission, Bite clarified, her tone annoyingly patient. We can keep the data analysis going, but comfort is going out the airlock. Comfort left the building ages ago, Verla noted, fingers flying over her console. If we can keep the essential systems running long enough to finalize the evidence, we might just crawl out of this alive. Crawling is a step up from complete obliteration, Terran said with a cynical chuckle. I'll take it. Cashin surveyed the room, feeling the pressure building in his chest. They were running on fumes and the universe seemed hell-bent on watching them crash. But then, when had it ever been easy? All right, he said, clapping his hands to get everyone's attention. Let's prioritize. Bite, keep focusing on those inconsistencies. Verla, make sure we don't lose what we've already got. Terran, see if you can find any more holes in Solari's data that we can exploit. The team nodded, diving back into their tasks with a grim determination that Cashin both admired and pitied. They were all battered and bruised by the journey, yet here they were, stubbornly refusing to back down. Bite, Cashin said, his voice low, we've got to find a way to buy more time. Any ideas? Bite considered for a moment, her digital presence shimmering with thought. We could try rerouting auxiliary power from the environmental systems. It'll get a bit stuffy. Cashin grinned, though it lacked his usual humor. Stuffy, huh? I've been accused of being full of hot air before. Let's make it literal. As Bite set to work, Cashin felt the heat in the room inch upwards, a slow reminder of their precarious situation. The suffocating embrace of failure was creeping closer, but it wouldn't claim them today. Remember, folks, Cashin called out, an edge of irony lacing his words, we're all in this together. Misery loves company, and I'm delighted to share it with all of you. The snort of laughter that rippled through the room was more sardonic than genuine, but it was enough to break the tension for a moment. They were a ragtag bunch, held together by duct tape, stubbornness, and sheer force of will. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity, each minute carving deeper lines of exhaustion into Cashin's face. But slowly, painfully, they were making progress. Their patchwork plan was coming together, piece by piece, like a jigsaw puzzle missing half the pieces. Got it, Verla finally announced, her voice triumphant. All the data's compiled and ready. Solari's not going to know what hit them. Cashin allowed himself a brief smile. Good. We'll hit them where it hurts and make them squirm. Terran, what's our biological angle looking like? Terran straightened, his expression a mix of fatigue and fierce determination. We've got enough to challenge their claims. It's not a slam dunk, but it's a solid argument. Solid's better than nothing, Cashin replied, feeling a flicker of hope. All right, let's prepare for the next round. We're still in this fight. The team rallied, renewed energy surging through the room, at least until the lights flickered again, reminding them of the precarious balance they were walking. Well, if we crash and burn, Verla said, her tone dry, at least we'll go out with a bang, or a whimper, Cashin added. Whichever comes first. As they settled in for another long night, Cashin couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with his mismatched crew. They were a testament to resilience. each of them flawed and imperfect, but together they formed a ragged line of defense against the onslaught of corporate greed and ecological catastrophe. "Let's give Solari hell," Cashin said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Hell's what we're good at," Verla replied with a wry grin. "Might as well make it our specialty." And with that they plunged back into their work, the weight of their mission pressing down on them like a starship caught in a gravity well. Despite the odds stacked against them, they forged ahead, refusing to surrender to the darkness closing in around them. Cashin knew they were approaching their darkest hour, but he also knew that sometimes a flicker of light was all it took to spark a revolution. As long as they kept fighting, there was still hope. In the end, they were more than just a team. They were a force to be reckoned with, a motley crew bound by purpose and determination. And while the universe may have been an uncaring expanse of chaos and indifference, they were determined to carve their own destiny within it. In that moment, Cashin realized that, no matter how bleak things seemed, they had something Solari never would: each other. And in the grand scheme of things, that was a power all its own. As the hours waned and the room buzzed with the hum of defiance, Cashin took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battles to come. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. And in that shared resolve, they found a strength that even Solari couldn't break. Cashin leaned over the mess of cables and flickering screens like he was about to whisper sweet nothings. Instead, he muttered, "If this isn't the biggest digital dumpster dive of all time, I don't know what is." Bite, hanging around like an unwanted specter, chimed in. "Your skills in understatement never cease to amaze, Cashin." Verla snorted from her corner, her console flashing error messages like a malfunctioning disco ball. "Don't flatter him too much, Bite. His head's already the size of a small asteroid." "Hey, an asteroid has more chance of solving this mess than Solari's tech does," Cashin shot back, eyes scanning data that seemed more convoluted than a bureaucrat's wet dream. The makeshift war room hummed with a sort of chaotic rhythm, the team glued to their stations, each fighting their own personal battle with the blinking, beeping hellscape that was their reality. If the universe had a sense of humor, it was gallows at best. "New development on the Solari front," Bite announced, flickering slightly. Her holographic form was like a ghost in a machine, forever on the verge of disappearing. "They've accelerated their timeline, looking to fast-track Earth's acquisition." Cashin cursed under his breath, a string of words that would make a sailor blush. Of course they have. Because nothing screams urgency like impending planetary doom. "Got it in one," Bite replied. "If they move any faster, they're going to collide with their own arrogance." Verla slammed her console, startling everyone as she let out a triumphant cackle. "Damn it, I think I've found it." Cashin's eyebrows shot up. "Please tell me that's not just caffeine-fueled hallucination speaking." "Nope," Verla said, her eyes gleaming with the kind of manic energy that could only come from too little sleep and too much stress. "Solari's data has a flaw, a big, gaping hole." "Define big," Cashin said, sidling over to peer at her screen with the air of a man who'd just been offered the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. "Big enough that if we exploit it, their whole case for claiming Earth's toast," Verla replied, a grin spreading across her face. "Doctor," Taryn ambled over, curious as ever. "And what particular brand of idiocy have they blessed us with?" "Terraforming efficiency calculations," Verla explained. "Turns out their equations assume a perfectly stable environment, a paradise of consistency, if you will." Cashin let out a low whistle. "In other words, they're trying to plant daffodils in a hurricane." "Exactly," Verla said. "They base their projections on a static model, and Earth right now is anything but. Chaotic weather patterns, shifting ecosystems. They didn't account for any of it." "Idiots," Taryn mused, shaking his head. "And they call themselves scientists." "More like snake oil salesmen," Cashin added. "This is the break we need, folks. Let's drive a space cruiser right through their calculations." Bite shimmered with a faint sense of approval. "It's a precarious opportunity, but with it, we might just salvage a future." Or at least delay the inevitable, Cashin said, ever the optimist. All right, team, let's roll with this. Bite, I want you to run simulations on what Verla's found. See how we can use this to shove it back in Solari's smug faces. Consider it done, Bite said, her form flickering as she got to work, the room tinged with the eerie glow of her presence. The team dove into action, the atmosphere shifting from doomed resignation to something resembling hope. It was a fragile thing, like a star on the brink of going supernova, but it was theirs to hold onto. What's our next move, fearless leader? Verla asked, her fingers flying over the console in a blur. Cashin smirked. We hit them where it hurts. We strip away their claims and reveal the truth. They can't save Earth with their half-baked plans. We need to expose their incompetence before they can reel the planet in. Sounds delightful, Taryn said with a wry grin. About time we give them a taste of their own medicine. As if on cue, the lights flickered again, mirroring the tenuous grip they had on their own survival. The universe had a funny way of reminding them who was really in charge. We need to move fast, Cashin said, his voice a mix of urgency and determination. Every minute counts. The war room buzzed with renewed energy, each team member driven by the singular purpose of turning the tide. It was a tall order, but when had anything been easy for them? Iors stretched thin, the line between day and night blurred by the ever-present hum of technology and stress. Cashin felt the weight of it all settling on his shoulders, but he pushed it aside, focusing solely on the task at hand. Simulations are complete, Bite announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser scalpel. We've got leverage. Cashin felt a spark of triumph flare in his chest. Good. Let's prepare our case and get ready to shove it down Solari's collective throat. Verla shot him a wicked grin. I've always wanted to see a corporation choke on its own hubris. Well, you're about to get your wish, Cashin replied, feeling the fire of determination burn away the fatigue. Let's make them regret ever setting their sights on Earth. The team rallied around the plan, their efforts a concerted push against the inevitability of Solari's overreach. They were a scrappy bunch, flawed, stubborn, and more than a little jaded, but they had something Solari didn't, a reason to fight. As they worked, Cashin couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with his crew. They were more than just colleagues, they were a ragtag family, each member contributing their own unique skills to the fight. Drinks on me if we pull this off, Cashin said, breaking the silence with a touch of humor. Assuming we can find a bar that hasn't been swallowed by corporate greed, or one that hasn't been converted into a Solari recruitment center, Taryn added dryly. In that case, I'll take mine neat, Verla chimed in, her fingers never pausing in their dance over the console. The room buzzed with energy and snark, the perfect combination to fuel their efforts. They were on the precipice of something big, and despite the odds, Cashin believed in their ability to pull it off. As the Iors wore on, the war room became a hotbed of activity, each member of the team pulling their weight to ensure victory. They were tired, hungry, and running on fumes, but hope had a way of fueling even the most weary of souls. Cashin pressed forward, driven by the knowledge that they were on the verge of something monumental. Solari might have the resources and the arrogance, but they had the truth, and that was a powerful weapon indeed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they had everything they needed. The data was compiled, the evidence was ready, and the team was poised to strike. Let's show Solari what we're made of, Cashin said, his voice steady with resolve. It's time to take the fight to them. The team nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and grim humor. They were ready to face the storm, armed with the knowledge that they had a chance, no matter how slim, to change the course of history. As they prepared for the final push, Cashin felt a surge of pride for his ragtag crew. They were battered and weary, but their spirits were unbroken. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, and nothing, not even the might of Solari, could take that away. With their plans in place, they steeled themselves for the battles to come. It was time to face Solari head-on, to expose the flaws in their plans and to fight for a future worth believing in. In those moments, Cassian knew that they were more than just a team. They were a beacon of hope in a universe that seemed determined to snuff them out. But as long as they had each other, they were unstoppable. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, they set out to face their greatest challenge yet, ready to fight for the world they called home. "Let's make some history," Cassian said, his voice ringing with confidence. "History's overrated," Verla replied with a smirk. "But this is going to be legendary." With that, they plunged into the unknown, determined to defy the odds and carve out their own destiny in the stars. The interstellar court was a temple to bureaucracy, complete with the spiritual fervor of a DMV on a Monday morning. The air was thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and desperation, as every hopeful soul waiting for a verdict clung to their seats like barnacles to a sinking ship. Cassian vilely stood in the center of this circus, a man with a mission and a migraine that could fell a lesser mortal. He adjusted his collar, shot a quick glance at his team, Verla, Dr. Terran, and the ever-flickering Bite, before locking eyes with Xylo Zinter, the Solari Corp representative. Xylo's alien face bore more angles than a geometry textbook, and his storm-colored eyes promised a tempest of corporate bullshit. "Gentle beings of the court," Cassian began, his voice carrying a mix of determination and the kind of humor that less discerning folk might call insanity. "Today, we unravel the tangled mess Solari Corp has made of Earth's situation." Xylo sneered, his expression dripping with the kind of smugness usually reserved for people who cut in line at coffee shops. "Solari Corp's intentions are noble. The acquisition of Earth is a necessity for its survival and prosperity." Cassian raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Right, and I'm a unicorn. Your terraforming tech is about as reliable as a politician's promise. You've based your entire case on the assumption Earth is a perfectly stable sphere of paradise." Xylo's sneer faltered, just a little, like a cheap facade in the rain. "Our calculations are state-of-the-art. More like art of the state," Cassian quipped, "specifically the state of denial." He gestured to Bite, who flickered into action, projecting a series of holograms that danced in the stale air. "Here's the flaw in your so-called ironclad case, Xylo." The holograms displayed a dizzying array of numbers, graphs, and animated disasters, hurricanes twisting like celestial ballerinas, floods swallowing coastlines, ecosystems collapsing faster than a souffle in an earthquake. "Your tech assumes static environments," Cassian continued, his voice sharpening like a scalpel. "But Earth's no sleeping beauty. It's more like a rebellious teen, unpredictable and prone to tantrums." Verla, leaning back in her chair with a grin mischievous enough to give the Cheshire Cat pause, piped up. "In other words, your terraforming's like trying to paint a masterpiece on a canvas that's also on fire." The room erupted into a mix of gasps, murmurs, and the occasional disbelieving chuckle. Xylo's composure cracked further as he scrambled to find a response that didn't involve full retreat. "Doctor," Terran leaned over to Cassian, whispering. "I don't think he was expecting a reality check today." Cassian smirked. To be fair, he wasn't expecting reality at all. Bite's holograms shifted, now showcasing simulations, scenarios where Solari's plans failed spectacularly, resulting in catastrophes that would make a doomsday prophet seem optimistic. Cassian let the implications hang in the air, savoring the moment. In short, Solari's idea of saving Earth is about as effective as using a sieve to hold water. "You might want to reconsider your strategy." Xylo, sweat starting to bead along his angular forehead, cleared his throat. "Your arguments are intriguing, but Solari's resources will ultimately prevail." "Yeah, if by prevail you mean reduce to rubble," Verla cut in. "Your resources are a liability, not a solution." Cassian nodded, feeling the tide turn. "Earth's not just a target for your corporate takeover, Xylo. It's a living, breathing planet full of people who won't roll over and let you trample all over it." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted, like a current of electricity coursing through the assembled masses. Cashin could sense the skepticism in the room morphing into something else, something that tested the limits of hope. "You see," Cashin said, delivering the final blow with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, "we humans aren't just passengers on this shipwreck of a planet. We're problem solvers, innovators, and survivors. And we won't let Solari, or anyone else, decide our fate." Byte's holograms flickered one last time, a final flourish to underscore the point. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that's more alive than a million words, as the weight of Cashin's argument settled over the assembly like a shroud. Xylo's alien features twisted into a rictus of frustration, his composure unraveling like a cheap sweater in a catfight. "This is preposterous." "What's preposterous," Cashin shot back, "is thinking you could pull a fast one on us and claim Earth without a fight." "Doctor," Terran chimed in, voice dripping with sarcasm, "maybe next time you should bring more than just slick marketing and a sense of entitlement." The ripple of laughter that followed was the sound of an empire's foundation trembling, the sound of the underdog gaining ground. The presiding judge, a weary-looking entity with eyes that had seen more than their fair share of interstellar shenanigans, finally spoke. "Cashin Virely, your case is compelling. The court will deliberate on the evidence presented." Cashin offered a curt nod, the tension in his shoulders easing, if only slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor. We trust you'll make the right decision." With that, the proceedings concluded, the courtroom emptying like a deflated balloon, leaving behind echoes of what had transpired. Back in the makeshift war room, the team gathered around, the adrenaline of the confrontation giving way to a bone-deep weariness. "Well, we did it," Cashin said, dropping into a chair with all the grace of a marionette with its strings cut. "We gave him hell." Verla smirked, her fingers still twitching from the courtroom theatrics. "And we didn't even get thrown out. That's a bonus, Doctor." Terran chuckled, the sound dry as Martian dust. "Now we just have to wait for the verdict. No pressure." Cashin leaned back, closing his eyes briefly against the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights. "Let's hope the universe cuts us some slack for once." Byte shimmered into view, her holographic form steady and reassuring. "Whatever happens, we stood our ground. That's something to be proud of." "Yeah," Cashin said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "We may be the underdogs, but we sure as hell can bite." The team settled into a comfortable silence, each of them lost in their thoughts, the weight of the day's events settling over them like a familiar, albeit slightly uncomfortable, cloak. Earth's fate hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of uncertainty, but for the first time in a long time, Cashin felt a glimmer of hope. They'd fought against the odds, against a corporation's greed and arrogance, and they'd done it together. As the hours ticked by, the war room slowly came back to life, the team preparing for whatever came next with the kind of grim determination that had seen them through countless challenges before. Cashin looked around at his ragtag group of rebels, a sense of camaraderie warming the chill in the air. They might be battered and bruised, but they were still standing, still fighting, and still ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. "Drinks on me later," Cashin said, breaking the quiet with a grin. "Assuming we aren't all hunted down by Solari's goons." Verla winked. "I'll hold you to that, boss. And make sure the drinks are strong enough to kill a small horse. Or at least make us forget our impending doom," Dr. Terran added with a chuckle. Byte's voice, warm with digital affection, cut through the banter. "Whatever the outcome, you all did an amazing job. Earth's lucky to have you in its corner." Cashin felt a swell of pride at Byte's words. "Thanks, Byte. Couldn't have done it without you." As they settled into the waiting game, Cashin couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. They'd done everything they could, and now it was up to the powers that be to decide their fate. But whatever happened next, Cashin knew one thing for sure. They'd fight to the bitter end for Earth, for their home, and for each other. And that, in the grand scheme of things, was worth more than any corporate promise or courtroom victory. With the war room buzzing quietly around him, Cashin closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of rest before the inevitable storm. They were far from done, but they'd taken a stand, and that was something worth celebrating. The universe might be against them, but as long as they had each other, they'd face whatever came with heads held high and a healthy dose of irreverent humor. Because in the end, that's what made them human and what might just save them after all. The universe, as Cashin liked to remind his team, was a fickle mistress. Now, as they sat in the aftermath of a legal showdown with Solari Corp that could have been scripted by a particularly cynical comedy writer, this seemed clearer than ever. The interstellar court had ruled in their favor, and Earth was safe, for now. The victory tasted sweeter than any drink Cashin had ever swilled down in a bar, and it didn't come with a hangover. Yet. "Looks like we've managed to pull a rabbit out of a corporate hat," Cashin said, glancing around the makeshift war room that had become their second home, or first, if you considered the sorry state of their actual home planet. Verla, never one to miss a beat, leaned back in her chair and gave a mock salute. "All hail the miracle workers, also known as us, Doctor." Taryn, who had perfected the art of looking perpetually unimpressed, nodded. "Honestly, I half expected the universe to implode before we'd see Solari eat their words." Bite flickered into view, her holographic form as steady as ever, despite the chaos they'd waded through. If it's any consolation, I recorded the moment Xylo tried to argue back and made it into a GIF. "It's surprisingly therapeutic," Cashin chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck as he surveyed his team. "Well, don't get too comfortable. Earth's still a mess, and last I checked, we're not exactly swimming in resources. Resourcefulness, though, got plenty of that," Verla said, winking at Bite. "Besides, only takes a little human ingenuity to turn a wasteland into a wonderland, or something less poetic and more realistic, Doctor." Taryn arched an eyebrow. "Like a slightly less hostile wasteland, exactly," Verla replied. "One step at a time, right?" Cashin nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like an unwelcome but familiar coat. "We've got work to do. Solari's not going away quietly, and Earth's climates are still more unpredictable than a temperamental toddler." "Ah, toddlers," Bite mused. "The original agents of chaos. Speaking of chaos," Verla cut in, "I've managed to tweak the terraforming tech. Made it less likely to blow us all to kingdom come." Cashin grinned. "Good, because I'd rather avoid becoming cosmic debris." The war room buzzed with the sound of consoles booting up, the team slipping back into their routine with the ease of well-worn boots. Cashin watched them work, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "All right, people," he said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get to it. Earth's not going to save itself." As they dove into the task of salvaging their home, Cashin couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. They'd stood up to one of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy, and while they hadn't exactly sent Solari packing, they'd definitely given them a black eye. "Hey boss," Verla called, breaking him out of his reverie. "Any thoughts on how we're going to tackle the oceans?" Last I checked, they were auditioning for the role of Earth's most temperamental disaster. Cashin shrugged, a smile tugging at his lips. "I'm open to suggestions. Preferably ones that don't involve sacrificing ourselves to the gods of climate change, Doctor." Taryn snorted. "Let's just hope those gods are in a forgiving mood. And if they aren't?" Verla asked, fingers dancing over her console as she pulled up a series of maps that looked more like abstract art than anything useful. "We adapt," Cashin said simply. "Like we always do. Humanity's pretty good at that." And so they worked, piecing together a plan as if assembling a jigsaw puzzle without the box lid to guide them. Bite's holographic projections filled the room with data, simulations, and the occasional cat gif when morale needed boosting. Iors slipped by in a blur of activity, and when exhaustion finally caught up with them, Cashin called for a break. "Drinks, anyone," he offered. "I hear there's a place nearby that serves something resembling whiskey." Verla perked up at that, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Are we talking real whiskey, or, I swear this tastes like whiskey, does it matter?" "Doctor," Taryn interjected, pushing back from his station. After today, I'd drink shoe polish if it came in a glass. With a collective groan of agreement, the team abandoned their consoles and headed for the nearest excuse for a bar. The place was dimly lit, as all the best interstellar dives tended to be, with a clientele that looked like they'd just stepped off the set of a gritty space opera. Cashin ordered a round of drinks, raising his glass in a toast as the team settled into their seats. "To Earth," he said, voice strong and sure. "And to us. We might not be heroes, but we sure as hell can fight like them." The clinking of glasses was followed by the burn of alcohol that was strong enough to make Cashin's eyes water. Or maybe that was the sentimentality of the moment. "Here's to hoping we don't have to do this again anytime soon," Verla said, taking a long sip of her drink. "But if we do," Bite added, her holographic form flickering beside them like a digital guardian angel, "we'll be ready." Cashin nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie and purpose that reminded him why they fought in the first place. Earth might be battered and bruised, but it was still standing, and so were they. "Cheers to that," Cashin said, leaning back in his chair as the weight of the day finally began to lift. "And here's to the universe finally cutting us some slack." Their laughter filled the bar, a sound that was equal parts defiance and relief. For now, at least, they could enjoy their victory, however fleeting it might be. Cashin knew they still had a long road ahead, filled with challenges that would test their resolve and push them to their limits. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about the future. As the night wore on and the drinks flowed, Cashin realized that Earth's true strength lay not in its resources or technology, but in its people. People who were stubborn enough to fight for their home, no matter the odds. With his team by his side, Cashin knew they could face whatever came next. They'd adapt, they'd survive, and they'd keep fighting because that's what humans did best. And as the universe continued its unpredictable dance around them, Cashin knew one thing for sure. They'd be ready to take it on, one step at a time.